This is my running route. This is where I go when I'm at home to be able to go out on my runs. This is the Dromara Lake behind me at the foot of Slieve Crwb, and this is where I come to run round when I'm doing my exercise. And you can see from the sheep in the background that there's fields all around me, and when I come round and do these runs, it always brings to mind Psalm 23, and I start to think about it while I'm running. It's a psalm that's probably the most well-known psalm in the Bible. It teaches us that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. It tells us and shows us the way and what happens when we're a Christian. As I said, it's a psalm that's very close to me. It's a psalm that we're currently teaching our children to memorise at home while we're in lockdown. It's a psalm that I read last year at my nan's funeral. A psalm that I'm glad that I know really well. Because my dad told me that I was reading it as I was leaving the house to go to the church for the funeral. So it's a psalm that I'm glad is close to my heart. It reminds us about how when we come to trust God as our shepherd, it tells us that he leads us. Just as a shepherd leads sheep. We've seen sheep in a field and we've seen how the shepherd leads them. Sheep are not clever animals. Sheep need led, they need helped, they need guided in order to be able to go the right way and not end up in trouble. And it says that at the beginning of our Christian life, that's what we're like. We're like sheep in need of a shepherd, someone to lead us and guide us. And that's what shepherds do. It says that he makes us to lie down in green pastures. He leads us beside the still waters. It says that he helps us, he calms us, he gives us an assurance that we can only find when we know that we have salvation. It gives us that assurance in our heart that we can lie down in green pastures, that we can be led beside still waters, led into calm times with that assurance of knowing that God is with us, that he restores our soul. He leads us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It tells us that when we follow God, he leads us the right way, he teaches us the right things, he shows us the way to go. But we're thankful for the fact that that is only the beginning. David then reminds us that the Christian life isn't all about trusting God and everything will be great. He then says to us, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." He shows us that even as Christians, we'll go through rough times. We'll go through hard times of trials and difficulties. Some of us like what we're going through at the minute. But yet it tells us that just like a sheep, when he is following the shepherd, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The sheep knows that following the shepherd's rod and staff is what is going to lead him to safety. He doesn't necessarily know where he's going. He doesn't know why he's going there. But he knows that if he keeps following the rod and the staff of the shepherd, then he'll be safe. And that's what the Bible's teaching us, that we, like sheep, follow God, follow his rod and his staff, knowing that he will lead us to safety, even in the midst of tough times, even in the midst of hard situations and circumstances. We know that if we keep trusting in God and following God, then he will lead us to safety. He'll lead us into the way of understanding. Now, if our relationship with God was just us following mindlessly what God had told us, then it would be a pretty shallow relationship. But thankfully, David goes on to show us that it's so much more than that, and so much deeper than just a sheep following a shepherd. But what we suddenly see is this analogy changing. It says there in verse 5, "Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over." Sheep don't sit at tables. So David was showing us about how our relationship with God changes and evolves. It's not just sheep being led by a shepherd, but yet it is God giving us gifts and talents and abilities to be able to use for him. It says that he prepares a table before us. It says that he gives us all the food that we need in order to be able to sustain ourselves when we go out on our own. When we're faced with people who are against the gospel, when we're faced with people who don't like what we believe, it says that God gives us everything that we need in order to be able to look after ourselves and to be able to defend ourselves. It's an ever-changing relationship, a growing relationship where God gives us responsibility. He doesn't just choose us and looks after us, but he gives us those gifts and talents for us to be able to go out and to use them to be able to serve him and to be able to tell other people about him. David finishes by leaving us this promise at the end of the passage. He says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me